Okay.
Well,
Good.
good morning. This is Alabbhanīyaṭhānasutta and Alabbhanīyaṭhānasutta live, or so it seems. So we're going to be discussing a sutta that is very important this morning. The sutta is talking about 5 situations that everyone encounters at some time or another in their lives. And I'm going to be reading Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation first, and then we can look at Bhante Sujato's translation just for comparison, and because it's so lovely how he has the Pali available. So we'll be sharing the screen. So Bhante Sujato has translated this as, how has he got it? He's got it as
Bhante Sujato, things that cannot be had.
things that cannot be had. And Bhante Bodhi has it translated as situations. So these are situations that occur, or things that people wish for that are unable to obtain. So starting out with and I do want to encourage people. I know Wandanas in the live audience, and appreciate your being here. And you want to put something in the chat when you see a question or something as it comes up, and we can address it at the end, and then we will allow for time at the end. We'll just close, and then we'll have we can have a little discussion afterwards. So that way we can speak freely. So, but any specific questions regarding the sutta, what the meaning of the sutta is, what something that you might want to comment on within the sutta, you can put in the chat, and then we can address that at the end. So here are the 5 situations or things that can't be had. Bhikkhus, there are 5 situations that are unobtainable by any ascetic or a Brahman or a Deva or Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world. What 5? May what be subject to old age not grow old. This is a situation that is unobtainable by an ascetic or Brahma or Deva or Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world. And Bhante Sujato has it slightly differently.
There are 5 things that cannot be had by any ascetic or Brahmin or God or Mara or divinity or by anyone in the world. What 5? That someone liable to old age should not grow old. That someone liable to sickness should not get sick. That someone liable to death should not die. That someone liable to ending should not end. And that someone liable to perishing should not perish.
So this is similar to the 5 reflections that when we say to ourselves, I have the nature to age. I am not gone beyond aging. I have the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become separated from me. And what's missing in this sutta it's in comparison to what I'm reciting now, is the reflection on the comma that
It's in the
each,
very last line.
well,
It's not within the 5.
it's not within this 5. This is what I'm talking about
Yeah.
now. But thank you for pointing that out.
Mhm.
We'll see that. But this reflection at the start does not talk about comma, but it's talking about people and things in our lives that are subject to all 5 of these. So an uninstructed worldling, I'm getting down here, because for an uninstructed worldling, what is subject to old age grows old. When this happens, he or she, they do not reflect thus. I am not the only one for whom what is subject to old age grows old. For all beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, what is subject to old age grows old. If I were to sorrow, languish, lament, beating my breast, and become confused when what is subject to old age grows old, I would lose my appetite, my features would become ugly, I would not be able to do my work, my enemies would be elated, my friends would become saddened. Thus, when what is subject to old age grows old, this person sorrows, languishes, laments, weeps, beating their breast, and becomes confused. This is called an uninstructed worldly, pierced by the poisonous dart of sorrow, who only torments himself. And Bhante Sujato has it somewhat differently there.
Do you want to read it, or are you going to just gloss it?
It's something similar to this, but you could just read it. That would be helpful.
I'll just read the one, and it applies to all of them. An unlearned, ordinary person has someone liable to old age who grows old, but they don't reflect on old age. It's not just me who has someone liable to old age who grows old. For as long as sentient beings come and go, pass away, and are reborn, they all have someone liable to old age who grows old. If I were to sorrow and wail and lament, beating my breast and falling into confusion, just because someone liable to old age grows old, I'd lose my appetite and my physical appearance would deteriorate. My work wouldn't get done, my enemies would be encouraged, and my friends would be dispirited. And so, when someone liable to old age grows old, they sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. This is called an unlearned, ordinary person, struck by sorrow's poisoned arrow, who only mortifies themselves.
So we could go through the 5, and I'll go over to Bhante Sujato's, and we can look at the Pali a little bit more closely, because there's some of it that's so beautiful when you see like the sorrow's poisoned arrow, and the how people torment themselves by that arrow. And that's, I mean, I'm saying beautiful in that the imagery is just so, it's just very poignant. And if we see that what we're doing to ourselves, that we're actually harming ourselves, this is the whole point of this and this is like going to extreme with grief. Like grief is a normal response, but they're just really harming oneself by carrying on so much with grief. So like if your parents are growing old, and like a people middle-aged, a lot of times that the people that were really strong and healthful in their lives, they're starting to get frail and elderly and needing help and maybe losing their memories and things like that. If a person would carry on weeping and wailing about it, wouldn't be helpful to them or the person that is now needing help. So this is the first one is old age. The second one is illness. As for oneself and for others, I think this is again for the uninstructed worldling, what is subject to illness falls ill. What is subject to death dies. What is subject to destruction is destroyed. What is subject to loss is lost. When this happens, one does not reflect thus. I am not the only one for whom what is subject to loss is lost. For all beings who come and go, who pass away and undergo rebirth, what is subject to loss is lost. If I were to sorrow, languish, lament, weep, beating my breast, and become confused, when what is subject to loss is lost, I would lose my appetite and my features would become ugly. I would not be able to do my work. My enemies would be elated. My friends would become saddened. Thus, when what is subject to loss is lost, one sorrows, laments, weeps, beating their breast, and becomes confused. This is called an uninstructed worldling, pierced by the poisonous dart of sorrow, who only torments themselves. So there's a sutta just after this, and it has the same teaching in it, and it's a story where King Pasenadi's wife, his beloved wife, Queen Malika, has passed away, and he's actually doing all this type of grieving, and he can't concentrate on being, his kingly duties, and he's just mourning over his wife's body, and his minister becomes very concerned about him, and he goes to the Buddha. And I think maybe the brings King Pasenadi, or he relates this teaching. I don't remember which it is, but
he went to the Buddha, the king also.
The king also went to the Buddha. So the minister brought him, I think, or suggested he go.
The king was actually visiting the Buddha. And then the minister came up and said, "I'm sorry, sire, the queen has died."
I think it, anyway, we'll have to look at that. I don't think it went quite like that. Because he's staying with the queen's body. He's not visiting the.
Oh, okay. I don't know which sutta.
That's the very next one. This is that I think you're confusing it with another one. But anyway, so we'll have to look at that. You can look at it. It's just you'll be looking at AN 549 if you want to look it up yourself. But the point here is that the king was actually disturbed in this way and wasn't able to let go until he heard this teaching. So then we go to the inverse of this, where the instructed noble disciple, and this is a noble disciple that has some attainment. So we're going from, it's almost like we go to extremes here, but we can actually bridge the gap. It takes some time to get to this point. Because for the instructed noble disciple, what is subject to old age grows old. When this happens, they reflect thus, I am not the only one for whom what is subject to old age grows old. For all beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, what is subject to old age grows old. If I were to sorrow, languish, lament, weep, beating my breast, and become confused, When what is subject to old age grows old, I would lose my appetite and my features would become ugly. I would not be able to do my work. My enemies would be elated. My friends would become saddened. Thus, when what is subject to old age grows old, they do not sorrow, languish, lament, weep, beating their breast, and become confused. This is called an instructed noble disciple who has drawn out the poisonous dart of sorrow, pierced by which the uninstructed worldling only torments themselves. Sorrowless, without darts, the noble disciple realizes nibbana. So this is a little different in Bhante Sujato's translation. So I think the point here to bridge the gap is to do this reflection when one of these situations come up, that I'm not the only one for whom what is subject to old age grows old. And then it goes down here. Again, for the instructed noble disciple, for what is subject to illness, falls ill. What is subject to death dies. What is subject to destruction is destroyed. What is subject to loss is lost. When that happens, they reflect, I'm not the only one for whom what is subject to loss is lost. For all beings that come and go and pass away and undergo rebirth, for what is subject to loss is lost. If I were to sorrow, languish, lament, weep, beating my breast, and become confused, when what is subject to loss is lost, I would lose my appetite and my features would become ugly. And I would not be able to do my work and so on. This is, most of us don't think about our enemies becoming elated and so on. But we do see that people get very concerned and that we're have to be consoled and it's good for people to be sympathetic and all that, but we're causing more suffering in the world than is necessary. There's like also the teaching about the two darts or the two arrows, and the second arrow is that one that we're tormenting ourselves. So the first one is that it is painful. These things are painful. And for most of us, we're not arahant, so we will have a certain amount of distress or grief when these things happen. But I think this kind of recollection that I'm not the only one who for this kind of thing happens, and that it's not going to help me by being overcome. This is really being overcome by grief and not accepting the situation, that this is a normal part of life. This is part of what the Buddhist teaching here is, that this happens to everyone. This is a normal part of life. Anyone that's born is going to experience some kind of loss. Losing of youth, losing of health, their own, or seeing other people or other beings in their lives, like their beloved pets, or and then objects being destroyed. Do you have anything to add to this?
Not at this moment.
Not at this moment. Okay. So then we can look at the poem, and then I'll go to Bhante Sujato's translation, because the poem and also the Pali is available. Another version of the poem and Pali is available, and we can look at that together. These bhikkhus are the 5 situations that are unobtainable by an ascetic or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world. So he's even including the devas in this and the great Brahma god. It is not by sorrowing and lamenting that even the least good here can be gained. Knowing that one is sorrowful and sad, one's enemies are elated. When the wise person does not shake in adversities, knowing how to determine what is good, their enemies are saddened, having seen that their former facial expression does not change. Wherever one might gain one's good, in whatever way, by chanting mantras, maxims, gifts, or tradition, there one should exert oneself in just that way. But if one should understand this good cannot be obtained by me or anyone else, one should accept the situation without sorrowing, thinking, the karma is strong. What can I do now? So that's quite powerful. And we can reflect on that. I'm going to look at Bhante Bodhi's translation. I'm going to stop the screen share. Did you want to say
That
something?
was Bhante Bodhi's.
I mean, Bhante Suchata's, excuse me. Thank you. All right. So then we go to, then we go here. Oh, we've got two in the chat. So I'm going to just go to the screen share. I think this is Bhante Sujato's. You were screen sharing, and I see two. And oh, how do I?
Do you want to read the poem first, or?
Okay, we could read the poem at the bottom first, the Bhante Sujato's, and then we'll get to the two in the chat. Sorrowing and lamenting doesn't do even a little of bit of good. When they know that you're sad, your enemies are encouraged. When an astute person doesn't waver in the face of adversity, as they're able to evaluate what's beneficial, their enemies suffer, seeing that their normal expression doesn't change. Chants, recitations, fine sayings, charity or tradition. If by means of any such things you benefit, then by all means keep doing them. But if you understand that this good thing can't be had by me or by anyone else, you should accept it without sorrowing, thinking that the deed is powerful. What can I do now? So this is the deed. He translates deed, karma as deed. This karma is action, deed, doing. And karma refers to our action. All our actions have consequence. In this life and in other lives. So there's consequence. Some karma is so powerful that it can't be averted, that we can't change a situation by chance, recitations, fine sayings, charity, or tradition. Sometimes we can benefit from these things, but we're all heirs to our karma. Like Nyanika was saying, this aspect is in the poem, but not in the five.
I mean, it's implied that there is a karma to having a body.
Well, that
There's a karma to being in situations with objects and relationships and things that are of the nature to pass. There is karma intrinsically.
Right. But in the reflection, when you're reflecting, yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, implicit. It's implicit.
That's the word.
Yeah, it's
word.
So I'm going to look at the chat. And let's see, four of it. Whoops. Why did it do that? I'm not sure why this chat is doing this.
I think you are. Oh, you're looking at history. Let's go back to the chat and can you scroll down? Because it's a continuous. So that's the start of
Okay,
today.
okay. Okay, current understanding of animals and humans and whatever is conditioned and can be perceived by five senses.
I think what this comment is saying is that all beings, and then the next sentence is including the devas, encounter this. And we
Yeah,
saw
that's
that in the
it.
poem.
Yeah, that's in the also in the reflection.
And
There's
then
the Brahmins and all humans, Brahmin, even, no matter what
no
class
matter
you
what,
are,
you're subject to this.
and also even the Brahma god.
Uh-huh.
And then the question is,
Mhm.
where does that flame go when the
No,
candle goes out?
the mind continues until it reaches nibbana, right? So that's the question. And which is the unconditioned state of the mind. Does the mind continue even after nibbana? So the question is,
That's unanswerable. The Buddha wouldn't even answer that question, so don't expect me to answer that. Okay. And so I know this part when the Buddha refuses to answer, but still doesn't stop me from wondering. Yeah, so I think it's more important that we work on purifying our hearts instead of worrying about at this point about nibbana, what nibbana is or what happens to the mind. Just I think we wouldn't be asking such questions if we've experienced nibbana. So if we purify our hearts in this lifetime as much as we can, then we won't have to ask that. The Buddha wants us to keep contemplating the mind satisfies itself.
my reply was, or until it tires itself out and we see the dukkha of it.
Oh, you were all having a
And
conversation on the site? Is that what was happening?
yes, so the mind contemplating is not until it's satisfied. Don't try to satisfy the mind. What happens is the heart becomes the understanding. There's a visceral embodied understanding that frees you from the mind grasping after answers.
Well, that's what I was pretty much saying anyway.
Absolutely.
So we would, for us to work on purifying our own hearts or minds is probably the most important thing we can do now. And then
Nibbana is not an intellectual exercise.
no, we can't, nothing that can be explained. So thank you for that question. And so then we were going to look at that poem a little bit more.
Okay.
So I think I need to shrink this somehow. I had
Oh, you're still sharing. So this is what
okay,
we're
okay.
seeing.
All right, here it is.
Yeah.
Okay. I just had to change views just to be able to see the chat. So there was something up here. I wanted to look at. So here is a arrow of sorrow or barb of grief, Soka Salena.
Mm.
And this is a sorrow's poisoned arrow. One only mortifies themselves. And that's oneself. And this is scorch, burns, roasts, hurts or harms, tortures, torments, or causes pain. So this is self-inflicted. And this is what the Buddha is telling us to avoid. And instead we should be, I'm just reiterating this because this is the point of the sutta. It's not just me who has someone liable to old age who grows old. For as long as sentient beings come and go and pass away and are reborn, they all have someone liable to old age who grows old. So we should reflect on that this is not, we are not the only ones. Everyone who's born, like you're saying, this is
The karma of having
the karma of having been born.
Whether you have a body or not, actually.
Yeah, that's what he's saying here, is that all beings. And then he says perishing here. And this is oh, I found it earlier. That you're not alone in this. And this is that's everything that's subject, anything that's conditioned is subject to destruction. Anything in the conditioned world. So he says perishing, but I think I like the translation of being destroyed, because I think that makes it clear that
It's living and non-living.
yeah, so our material possessions and but I think this is very poetic. Sorrow's poisoned arrow. How we struck, it's like we're striking ourselves. This is the second arrow, really. The first arrow is the experience, which is painful, but then that sorrow and grief is the second arrow.
And this is whether it's happening to oneself or you're witnessing it in another. So I remember when I was,
Why don't we get to this kind of, oh, well, go ahead.
That's all right.
Yeah, so we can open it up for discussion. It's only, oh, did you have something about compassion? You were going to share us something to help with this?
This I'd been looking at Bhante Analayo's book, The Mindfulness of Death and Dying.
Mhm.
And at the beginning of the book, he used another sutta reference. And I feel like really bringing the two things we need to bring in are compassion and wisdom. And I think to some extent, it's very obvious the wisdom component is in this sutta. I feel the compassion is also buried in there in regards to our relationship with sorrow. And so I would just like to read this, the excerpt from the other sutta.
Which sutta is this?
This is Anguttara 5.162. It's the one that talks about, it's the little part in the simile where you're crossing a desert and you see someone who is ill.
Oh, this is having to do with overcoming resentment. Is that the one?
Yes, I think so. I'm not I was really keyed in on this part, so I wasn't like looking at the whole entirety of that sutta.
Yeah, there's, well, that does appear there. So it's either
Mhm.
either somebody you really care about or to bring up the feeling of compassion.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah,
So that says it,
yeah.
what you just said.
So did you want to read that? The sutta? I mean the
Oh, sorry, that didn't come up. So the extract is, suppose a person comes and is standing to one side and sees that a traveler on an extended journey along a long road has become sick halfway, is exhausted and is suffering extremely. They are alone and without a companion. The village behind is far away, and they have not yet reached the village ahead. And if you're like me, when you just hear or read those words, you might notice this kind of sinking and sadness and resonating with that exhausted, suffering state. But then the person thinks, if this traveler were to get an attendant, emerge from being in the wilderness far away and reach a village or town, and were to be given excellent medicine and be fed with nourishing and delicious food, be well cared for, then in this way, this person's sickness would certainly subside. So the person observing the distressed traveler has extremely compassionate, sympathetic, and kind thoughts in the mind toward the sick person. So we're aligning ourselves with compassion. And I really try to do this before I read the suttas so that as I'm listening to the suttas, I'm open and I'm warm-hearted. And I feel like that's really the seat for wisdom to have. It's kind of like the soil is properly prepared.
Mhm. Yeah, so this simile I've heard in there's the fives where he's talking about having resentment for somebody, and then you think about them as if they had a illness or something, so bringing up the compassion. But I think to balance the mind in some way, if we have a loss,
Yeah.
then how do we balance our minds and reflecting that this is part of the nature of reality. Certainly, if I could help someone and I see somebody who's thirsty or someone who's in need of food and I have something I can give them or do something for them, then certainly what one should do that should help. But if you can't, um, um, then to become distressed yourself isn't going to change the situation.
And that's really the last line. It's understanding the comma of it. And the last line from the poem, it's understanding there's comma. And we can ask the question, what can I do now? And we're aligned really with wisdom as well as with compassion. We got our two wings.
So
Okay.
what Wandanas is saying that the chitta has enough wisdom. Well, I think we have to rely on somewhat on the teachings, and the chitta will head towards that wisdom if we allow it to, if we don't delude ourselves. I don't know if that the wisdom can just spring up spontaneously without a little bit of direction and help inclining towards it. So I think we can close. We'll close and then I'll open it up for more conversation if I want to know, or if I don't think we only have one person in the live audience right now. So we'll do the closing and then we can have a discussion. Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantam Abhivatimi. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Thank you all. We're going to go off YouTube now. So anyone on YouTube, we're closing for now.